Welcome to the Agent Bridge podcast. We're your hosts, Brandon Baca.
And I'm Arl Hessen.
The Agent Bridge is the proven path to real estate success without the burnout. All right, episode number 4. We're going to talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a real estate agent. By the way, this is a play on Patrick Lencioni's title, anyway, of his book, Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Have you read that?
I have read that.
Yeah, it's a pretty good book. By the way, hey, leaders are readers. If you are not reading books as a part of your professional development, you need to be. I find it's an essential. And the other thing that I find is a lot of people are like, I can't read. I'm not good at it. I don't like to do it. I don't have the discipline for it. And I would say get a, that's what Audible's for,
Yeah.
Just
how much
listen to
time are
that
you
stuff
spending
online.
cutting the grass or in the car or doing something like that? You can find some time to listen to a book.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing is, I had a mentor tell me one time, he says, oh yeah, I don't read for retention. And I was like, oh, which kind of changed my perception on reading because I was always thinking like, I've got to like implement all of these things right now and follow all the book guidelines and answer the questions at the end of each chapter. And, generally you're just trying to get the concepts from it and have some positive application.
Yeah, just surrounding yourself with that information constantly.
Right.
You'll take away the bits and pieces you need.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So let's talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a real estate agent. And, I've talked about this before. I've been a real estate coach for over a decade now. And these things definitely stand out in terms of, what makes a real estate agent work or what makes that work out and what doesn't make it work out. And there are some basic principles. They're deep principles. There's a lot of, application within those principles, but, if you kind of whittle it down to these 5 things that make an agent successful or not successful. So we want to break them down and talk about each of them individually. Warning, if you're listening to this and you feel convicted, I'm sorry, right? But that's probably a good thing if you feel a little bit of conviction for maybe having one of these dysfunctions. And so don't be discouraged by that, but be encouraged that it's something that you can adjust and move forward with a new strategy. So in the dysfunctions of a real estate agent, the number 1 that we've got listed here, I don't know that these are necessarily listed in terms of importance, but the number 1 is training, right? Which is just the understanding or getting understanding of how real estate works, period. Understanding the process, understanding the paperwork, understanding, the basics, because as you know, for everybody who's a real estate agent and is listening to this, you learned nothing applicable in real estate school.
Nothing.
And if you're a real estate school owner and you're listening to this, I'm sorry. But, I don't even remember the sort of Article Z or how many real estate commissioners are on the board. I don't remember any of that stuff because you're not using that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some level of training that happens beyond real estate school to help you be an effective real estate agent. And a lot of that I find is just knowing what to do with your day.
Yeah.
When I wake up every day as a real estate agent, what should I be doing? So I find that a lot of times when people are coming to our brokerage, they are saying things like, nobody told me what to do.
Yeah. And not having that in training impacts your confidence as an agent. So as soon as you get out of real estate school, you're a brand new agent. What is the reason that you don't want to reach out to your sphere and tell them that you're now an agent? Because you don't know what to do.
You don't know what to say.
You don't know what to say. You don't know what to do. You don't even know how to write a contract. So the fear factor of just not knowing is the biggest hindrance to getting your career going. So that training, the first 6, 12, 18 months, whatever it is hyper important to you becoming a successful real estate agent.
Yeah, no question at all. It's just, and I think it's just overall grabbing understanding of how real estate works, how real estate transactions work. What are the essential elements of a contract? How do I, even build out a contract in whatever sort of paperless system you're working. But it's incredibly important to grasp those concepts, and that wherever you are with a coach or a trainer or brokerage or mentor or whatever, that you've got a training system.
Yeah.
That they're showing you how to progress in your career through that training. And I find that in real estate, the weight of the training responsibility is on the brokerage.
Agreed.
Or on the real estate coach. That's who's responsible for developing you as a real estate agent from the training portion of it. So that responsibility belongs to the broker.
Yeah, and we try to do the best job that we can to prepare you for any and all scenarios for your first deal. But the truth of the matter is that this business is a lot of baptism by fire. You're going to learn more in that very first transaction probably than you'll ever learn as a real estate agent. Just you're going to experience everything firsthand, which will give you a better understanding. We can tell you 100 times how a transaction is going to progress, but the first time that somebody throws you that curveball that we can't account for, you should take it and learn from it.
Yep. And there's two types of training, right? There's that classroom training, which a lot of people will just like they'll take the mindset of, I need to learn everything in the classroom before I take it out in the field. And then you've got the field training, which is like, hey, what do I do in this particular circumstance or scenario? And I think you should be doing both simultaneously.
Agreed. And we always talk about this. This is really funny. I can't tell you how many people come to me with problems, and you're the same way because we've talked about this before. They're like, what would you do in this scenario? You're like, you just make it up. Like you just make it up, because in reality, you just need good problem solving skills, and you can be an excellent agent. Any problem that comes your way, you just find a way to solve it, whether it's knowing who to ask or knowing where to look or just doing something that you think sounds appropriate in that current situation.
Using Google, maybe?
Yeah, using Google. I mean, like 9 times out of 10, we're making up the answer. It's like, oh, how should I write this special stipulation? Like this. Yeah. And you're just making it up as you go.
The only difference between you and your broker in a lot of circumstances is experience and confidence in making things up.
Yes.
Right. Because you know, when you get experience in real estate, you realize like a lot of us, right, are kind of like, yes, we have some things that we've, some experience that we've gathered over the years that gives us the confidence to make that stuff up.
Yes.
So yeah, a training is an essential, but for those of you, and I find that there are two types of people. Some people are, what I would put in the learner category, and some people who are more in the, experience category. I think you need both. What I would encourage you guys as learners is to understand that a part of your classroom is in the field.
Yes. And honestly, this is probably one of the reasons where it might make sense to join a team, because, and we didn't, I don't think we planned to talk about team building on here or anything, but, just joining a team and surrounding yourself with even more people that you could reach out to, and, brokers, you can always reach out to the broker, but having a team member out that you can just call on and say, hey, I just went on a showing and this is what we saw. Like, have you ever run into this before? And, they probably are having team calls and things like that. And you can ask your questions there. That's probably just another reason for not only just joining the brokerage and listening to the training that they have available, but possibly thinking about joining a team where you have even more resources.
Yeah, you have the access points. And I mean, again, there's so much to learn. Having that security of access points could be extremely helpful. But the other thing is, for those of you guys that are in the experience category, well, I'm just going to learn this through experience. You need to take the time. Like, you need to read a contract right from start to finish and see what it says. So you got to create balance in both of those areas of training. And again, you learners, make sure you're getting out in the field, and you experienced people, make sure that you're taking the time to really understand the concept.
Yeah, and experience is great. I mean, that's a great way to learn. Like I said, baptism by fire. But the classroom learning is going to make your process a lot more efficient. There are situations that you're going to encounter in the field that are well spelled out in training, curriculum, that could get you where you need to be a little faster without having to make some of those mistakes that we've all made. Like, there's some basic mistakes that we can help you avoid.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that was number one. Dysfunction is, training or lack of training, right? The second dysfunction is the lack of action. And this one is a tough one because this is the number one. Because by the way, we go through these dysfunctions, a lot. And as I'm coaching agents and asking them what they need, but the number one answer is action. I need to take more action. So what are the hindrances to that? Why do you think people don't take action?
I mean, one we just talked about is training. I think a lot of people don't have the confidence to take action because they're not where they think they need to be from a training perspective. I think coaching can help in an action scenario as well. Or, we just talked about, you need a little bit more accountability and, having someone there to say, did you make those 10 calls this morning? That's accountability, and that's important for taking action. But I think a lot of times it's confidence, like especially for new agents, like coming in saying, I don't really know exactly what to do, so I'm just not going to do anything.
Yeah, I agree. I think confidence is extremely important. If there was one thing that I could give new agents, it would be confidence. And that confidence or the lack of confidence stems from, I think, fear of rejection.
Yeah, well, that's a great point too.
I mean, basically, that's that sort of thing that's buried deep in you is you don't want to be rejected. You don't want people to tell you no. You don't want to know the quote unquote truth that's on the other side of the conversation that you're having, that this person doesn't want to use you or doesn't like you or whatever. All of those things that are rolling around in your head that are sort of hardwired into you. But the reality of it is, it's like if you were going to be successful in real estate, you're going to have to conquer the fear of rejection. If you're going to conquer the fear of rejection, it's just going to be repetition. You're going to have to make the calls. When we've talked about this in episodes prior, it's like the only thing that's going to teach you is that repetition. You've got to make the calls over and over and over again. And so, I've even gotten to the point with coaching new agents is like, the goal you ought to be setting is to get the most no's, right? Or to get the most interactions, most conversations, to create your path to success. Because as we mentioned in the previous episode, you're either learning what to do or you're learning what not to do. But those first 30, 40, 50 calls, you're learning what not to do as much as you're learning what to do.
Yeah.
So stop looking at them as a win or a loss, right? It's not a win or a loss. It's a learning opportunity. And you taking the action is going to set in your brain or give you time to reflect on conversations to lead you on a greater path to success.
Yeah. I mean, real estate's a percentage game, right? Like, you're trying to have the most real estate conversations that you can possibly have, because guess what? Even the best lead sources, which I think on one of our episodes we talked about for sale by owners, I think it was like 15% if you have the right amount of conversation. Yeah. So some lead sources are like 2%. Mm-hmm. So it's like you really have to have a lot of conversations for no matter what lead source we're talking about in order to start creating transactions. So it's a volume thing. Like, you're going to get a ton of no's for every yes, and that's okay.
Yeah. I would say even now, and I do I spend a lot of time, recruiting as a part of building a real estate company. I get told no a lot. To me, that's a scenario in real estate that's not going to change, right? At whatever level you are in, you're going to encounter some level of rejection. And I would say even as you progress, your ratios even get lower as you're trying to sort of land bigger deals, if you will, right? So it's like, if I'm spending the majority of my time trying to attract or develop or convert high-performing real estate agents to joining the company, my rejection rate is going to be higher than yours if you're calling for sell by owners, right? I'm working on a 2% ratio in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Tommy boy got a lot of no's before he got that big yes.
Yeah, for you guys that don't know, RL and I have a connection over Tommy Boy.
Great movie.
It's hysterical.
One of the greatest of all time.
Wait, well, what's the second greatest of all time?
Black sheep.
It's just all Chris Farley for you, huh?
No, I don't know what's the second greatest, but Tommy Boy's got to be up there.
I'm
number
gonna
one.
put Bill Murray in there, but not Caddyshack. I think What About Bob was pretty good.
That's pretty good too.
Yeah. All right. So we've got the action part. You got to take action. You've got to develop that sort of thick skin, and it's only going to come through repetition. Man, just get through it. Just trudge through it and understand that that's your best education.
Yeah, not only that, but the more conversations you're having, the more fluid the conversations become. It just becomes easier and easier to talk about real estate.
Yeah.
Especially with people you don't know. And you're just going to get better and better as an agent having those conversations.
Yeah. And you're going to feel dumb, and they're going to ask you questions that you don't know the answers to, but that's what gives you confidence because you're going to go find the answer.
Yeah. Be a good BSer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay. Number 3, accountability. We talked about this in the previous podcast.
Talked about it a lot. Yep.
We did. And accountability is an extremely effective strategy to create the success you want. And to be humble enough to submit to having someone else keep you accountable is also an essential, I think, mindset for you to achieve greater success. So humble yourself and be willing to be accountable to someone for your greater benefit.
Yeah. And an accountability partner can be anywhere in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a mentor, a coach, someone in your brokerage, someone on your team, your wife or your spouse or your husband, just a friend who you say, hey, hold me accountable for this. I'll hold you accountable for that.
Right.
They can come from anywhere, but if this is something that you need, that drives you, if you have to have this, then you need to find this person in your life that can be there for you to say, hey, you said that you were going to do this week. It has to be done.
Right. So let me ask you this. For you, you're a highly disciplined person, former high-performing athlete. So you don't need I would say maybe as much accountability as the regular person. Do you still seek accountability or find accountability in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly having those conversations with my wife. Just to make sure that, hey, this is what I said I was going to do. And it's really just more, I would say, free-form discussion for us about anything that we're talking about. But I would say that I find it more in her than I do in the coaching world, just because I have a lot of I'm self-driven. So I don't need a lot of that. Like you said, you were going to do 6 tasks today. Like those kinds of things are easy for me as far as just keeping on task. But I would say I reach out to her more for those types of things.
Gotcha. I think for me, the more the more organic form of accountability, which I prefer, is just by surrounding myself with people who are like-minded and who are performers as well, to where I feel like to be friends with them or to be around them means that I need to be performing at a higher level. So there's sort of this organic accountability by being around those people. That to me is the most effective for my personality style, is just surrounding myself with the right people. But beyond that, I from a work setting, I try to surround myself with high performers that we have an expectation of, growth, have an expectation of accomplishment, have an expectation of, success or winning or whatever that is.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think surrounding yourself with people that you think are going to push you, and I did this my whole career, but surrounding yourself with people that you think are going to push you to where you want to be is very, very important.
Well, in every area of your life.
Yeah, and that is accountability. So I'm glad you actually said that. I don't really reach out for the daily kind of, you need to do X, Y, and Z, because that's what we talked about. Yeah. Once we've decided that this is something I need to do, that part. But what you're saying about accountability, it's a different take on it, and I definitely agree. Just surrounding yourself with those people that you think are going to push you to where you want to be.
Yeah, in terms of even in your personal life, being a good dad, you need to surround yourself with good dads, or being a good mom, you need to surround yourself with good moms. all of those things. And again, that's not a direct, hey, you need to do these things by next week. It's more like, hey, by surrounding myself with these people, they have a higher expectation of my personal development or my the way that I interact. And man, I'll tell you, it really rings true. It's like you are who you are, your friends.
Yeah.
You are the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yep. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that is definitely very important, and a different take on accountability than do these 3 things.
Yeah. Okay, so number 4 is skill building, which sounds a lot like training, but it's different. There's a delineation between, okay, we talked about the experience, and we talked about the, the experience take on training, and we talked about the classroom take on training. But skill building, I think, is more the practice of professionalism, or the practice of whatever you're trying to accomplish. So what that would look like to me is like scripting. Scripting would be, or you basically like creating those conversations over and over again. Scenarios where you're able to sort of, hey, what would I do in this particular scenario? So skill building has a little bit of a different level or a different take than training.
Yeah, I think of skill building more like you've now gone out and you've gone through a couple of transactions, but you keep stumbling on this one thing, whether it's negotiation or certain tactics, something very specific that you've identified that you need to work on now. And that's, maybe you find a coach that excels in that one area. But to me, skill building is like, all right, I've identified like a few areas of weakness, and now we're going to hone in on that. Like training is like, I just want to understand about real estate and what to do in a transaction and just some generalities, whereas this is more specific.
Right. It's like developing your craft. It's like a different level.
Yeah.
And I don't know for that I have this full analogy, but I think of the difference between, like if you're a carpenter, right? My dad, I grew up, my dad was a carpenter, right? Knowing how to use a miter saw, right? Versus creating, art, creating, something beautiful with the basic training that you've learned. You're developing on top of that, like these sort of different aspects of, how do I really turn this into something that's helpful to or beautiful to the people that are around me? Yeah. So yeah, it's just a little bit of a different level. So to see, my dad is like, yeah, of course he knows how to cut 45-degree angles and put, trim on the walls or something like that. But there's a whole other level of, creating a table that people are going to use for their family dinner, right? Or creating a bookshelf that's going to be in someone's house for years and years and years, like creating art. And I think, for real estate agents, like I do actually think that there's a level of artistic approach that you can take to real estate in the way that you treat people, the way that you interact with people, the way that you cultivate an experience for someone that goes beyond just knowing the rules.
Yeah.
And you learn that through, the experience of interaction. You learn that through, I would say just general experience and seeing, okay, what worked, what didn't work, how can I make this particular part better, and really sort of getting in on the details of cultivating an experience. Whether you're a real estate coach, whether you're a real estate agent, like cultivating an amazing experience for your clientele.
Yeah. And we joke about this a lot with me specifically, but like empathy and emotion are something that I don't have a lot of empathy. I don't have a lot. Yeah. So I spent a large portion of my career working with very specific people to help with these aspects, because as a leader, you have to have them. Yeah. They were a weakness for me and I knew it, which is good. Identifying the weakness is important, and understanding that you have it and accepting it. Mm-hmm. But I worked with someone specifically leading at my last company, just very specifically on those 2 skills. And I call that more skill building. Like I went to them for a very specific reason. I had a very specific weakness and I needed to address it so that I was able to cater to a lot more people. that's an example of,
Yeah. And for me, it's sort of the opposite. It's like, okay, well, I spend most of my time or have it's fairly organic for me to interact with people or have or create positive experiences for people. But when it comes to the sort of details, that's where I can kind of fall short. And so I've had to really work to develop the detail part of my life and create, effective strategy for a bigger success or train myself to do that.
yeah, it helps that my wife is super empathetic, super kind, super loving. Surrounding myself with that day in and day out certainly doesn't hurt me
Yeah.
because I don't have it naturally.
Absolutely. All right. Which brings us to our final part or dysfunction of a real estate agent, which is the lack of commitment. And this is a little complex in terms of like, well, what makes somebody committed versus not committed. And I think overall it's a mindset, right? It's where I find most people might not have the right mindset going in is, hey, let me just dip my toe in and see if this works, right? Let me just try it. And if you are coming into a real estate scenario or starting any new business, you go, let me just try this out and see if it works. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
You kind of have to have the mentality of like, hey, we're going to burn these ships. There's no way back. Like, I'm going to make this work, because there's so much working against you, and not to be negative, but it's like, you're just going to hit a lot of roadblocks on the way. And if you haven't made the commitment to succeed, you will find a reason to rationalize yourself out of success.
Agreed. I like that commitments last, honestly, because I feel like it's the culmination of everything we talked about, right? So you're in the brokerage now. There's a training plan for you. We're holding you accountable for your actions. You've gone through some transactions now. We're skill building on some very specifics. Now all that's left is to commit.
Yeah.
Like, there's no more excuses. Like, you have the training, you have the accountability piece. You've worked on some skills that you need help with in certain areas. You have to lean in and commit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the last step before, you getting where you need to be or where you want to be.
Yeah. It's almost like a sense of like, hey, is this going to work or not going to work? You have to sort of mentally say like, I'm going to make this work.
Yeah. We do those affirmations on our morning calls, right?
Yeah.
That's part of this. That's like, it's a mindset. Like, this is happening. Like,
Yeah.
no more are we saying I might, sell 10 houses this year. No, you're going to sell 10 houses this year.
Right.
And you have to tell yourself that. And that's a commitment to you, to an accountability partner, whomever you pick. But it's time to say, all right, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. And it's going to make you uncomfortable. And it's going to, and when you make that commitment, all of those sort of mental objections are going to start popping up. All the limiting beliefs are going to start popping up. And basically what you've got left is like, hey, listen, I don't have any, there is no plan B. There is only plan A.
You know what scares people the most about commitment is that this is the one thing that we've talked about that's all on you. Like, you can surround yourself with so many people that are going to hold you accountable. But at the end of the day, that final piece, that commitment, you have to do it. Nobody can force you to be committed.
Right.
Like, it's time. Like,
right.
It's over.
Yeah. So don't rationalize. Don't fall into the trap of, there are too many real estate agents. The market's not right. Houses aren't selling, whatever the case may be. None of that is actually true, right? There are people who are successful, but the difference is there are people who are committed and people who are not committed. And you've got to make the commitment to be successful ultimately.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's, anything else on that?
Nope.
Okay. So let's recap. So your 5 dysfunctions: number 1, lack of training. Number 2, lack of action. Number 3, lack of accountability. Number 4, lack of skill building. And number 5, lack of commitment. So I would encourage, each of you that are listening, really take some time and reflect on these things. Be honest with yourself on where you may be falling short. And here's what I want to tell you. Don't be judgmental of yourself. Don't be mad at yourself. Just observe, right? We all have these things like, I had a counselor one time tell me, he's like, you are not your brain, right? Your brain's going to tell you a lot of, it's going to give you a lot of negative feedback. You don't have to listen to it. It's like you can kind of tell your brain what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And you need to tell your brain what to do. So but ultimately, like, don't be judgmental. Just observe sort of the feedback that you're getting, as you sort of work through these to find out where you are and then work to improve them.
Agreed. I did want to say one thing. So, we've got enough topics for like 10 more episodes. Obviously, we freeform them all. So if you guys have something you want to hear about, shoot us a message. R.L. Hessen at theagentbridge.com or Brandon Baca at theagentbridge.com. Let us know what you want to hear about. We can do a podcast. We freeform these. We don't put a lot of notes down on paper, so it's easy for us to just work in a topic that somebody wants to hear about. So definitely share with us if there's something you want to hear about that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, awesome. All right, guys. Hey, thanks again for taking your time to be with us today. We appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one.